What is good, guys? It's Ray J back with another video. And this one, I'm going to be breaking down what's going on with Tesla stock and how Apple is not only going to affect it, but also Nvidia and the QQQ. I'm going to review some things I said from yesterday and then talk about other tickers and then talk about why on earth you have to be prepared for what's about to happen in the markets, in my opinion. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, in just about 10 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market for now. So one thing worth mentioning is that Tesla has a tendency. I actually have this chart right here involving Tesla and the QQQ, and this basically shows us that Tesla has a tendency of being impacted by the QQQ and the overall market. It's not just like, Tesla dictating the market here and there, but the way the market moves has a big effect on Tesla because the market is dictated by these algorithms and they make these shifts and these like very, very big adjustments based off news, based off events, and based off anything that happens to like much bigger stocks and things like that. So looking at the different weights of the QQQ, you can see it has a tendency of moving very similar to that of Tesla, except for the time when Tesla was underperforming near the end of 2022. Besides that time when Elon Musk was selling his shares, they've been moving very similarly. You can see they were pumping together, coming down together, pumping together, coming down. And I just want to call this out because whatever happens to the market, especially if you want to look at like Apple, all of this has a tendency of having an effect on Tesla. If you look at Apple next to Tesla, check this out, guys. Look, they were dropping very similarly, where Tesla was a little bit weaker during some periods. They ended up bottoming together back in like January of 2023. And then after that, we ended up seeing them, pushing together. They came down together. They pushed together. They came down very similarly, except Tesla was like dropping even harder after its like earnings and like other factors. But then they pushed together. They came down a little similarly. They pushed together, came down, pushed together, and then Tesla ended up peaking a little bit before Apple ended up peaking. This was back like around the August period. And then Tesla started selling off a little bit, and then Apple was also selling off, and then they just followed this very similar trend. And then what else is interesting is, Tesla has a tendency of kind of selling off a little bit before Apple. So could it be that, Tesla is the one that's selling off now and Apple's about to follow it, or something vice versa? But for now, I'm not going to really go down any like conspiracy theory routes or anything like that. You could see that Apple has a tendency of moving very similar to that of Tesla because of the fact that this entire market is dictated by similar algorithms. Now, with that happening, just as a review from yesterday, this line right here is actually representing the date of September 12th. I have this marked right here because on September 12th, Apple has announced they have this launch event for the new iPhone 15, and they may be announcing the new iPhone 15 or some new Apple Watches. That's important because as time goes on, Apple may end up doing something just like this. I actually drew out these possibilities in my previous video, and you guys could see that there's a possibility that Apple ends up starting to sell off because of the triple bearish divergence on the 30 minutes time frame. I showed you all of this yesterday. If you want more details about why I think this, you could just watch my video. But we might see Apple potentially start to curl. It either like pushes to fill its gap and then starts selling off. It hits this like 185 level and it bounces. It may pump approaching the event, right? We could get one more pump. And then after the event, it tends to sell off after big events. So who knows? But I want to break this down because in the context of the QQQ, right, the QQQ may follow a very similar trend. And let me show you what it may end up looking like. So this is a little bit tricky to predict because it depends on so many different factors. But one thing that's concerning about the triple Q would be the fact that we have some critical levels which could be tested. You're going to be watching this 374 area. That's going to be key for the triple Q. If that breaks, it could start sinking all the way down to 370, if not 368. Now, another reason why I say this about the triple Q is because this has a tendency of filling its imbalances and following the market. So if we do get a break below like 370 or so, or I'm sorry, like 371.5 or so, as well, we have this imbalance down here, which is just under our 200 EMA, very close to this like 366 to 368 levels. So we could see it visit those lower levels if we do end up getting a bit of a drop after starting like next week or so, depending on Apple or factors like that. Now, does it have to drop that hard? It doesn't have to, but Apple's thinking could cause it to drop at least a couple of dollars at the very least. So I do believe at the very least 375 or lower is going to be tested very, very soon, possibly even like 370. And with that potentially happening, right, us getting this bearish cross on the PPO on the 4 hour time frame, that could have a big effect on it as well. So, talking about some possibility like this, I would not rule this out. I just don't know if this is like a head and shoulders forming for the top, or if we get one last push up to that like 382 gap fill before it ends up coming down. This is a real possibility. We could get a sell off like this for a couple of trading days. We have a short trading week next week. The market is going to open on Tuesday again because it's going to be closed on Monday for Labor Day. So we could see a sell off before this thing makes an attempt to bounce. And I'm calling this out because this could have a big effect on Tesla stock simultaneously. For a stock like Nvidia, I want to just quickly talk about Nvidia. Nvidia could also be dictated by, Apple and the entire market, believe it or not. Because I'm saying this because the market has like momentum. When it builds momentum, it tends to move very similarly. I say this because you guys can remember the last couple of days the market was pumping, right? Together. It was in unison. Tesla pumped, so did Nvidia, the QQQ, Apple, they were pumping together. Then as of recent, some stocks are starting to show some weakness, especially the QQQ. This could lead to a change in the direction that Nvidia is moving and its market structure. So, if we do get some kind of pop, we're going to be watching to see if this is a possible like head and shoulders that could be developing on Nvidia. I think this is the most likely possibility. We will see if it could break 490. If it tries to break above like 495 to 500, it could try to invalidate this. But as of right now, if we get that 490 rejection, we could be seeing a head and shoulders bringing it all the way down to this low down here around like 465 over the next like couple of trading days. That is most definitely on the table. And I know it's very unfortunate, but it's a very volatile stock. And it's not the end of the world because this thing could run very, very quickly too. So there's a chance it could break down, to these lower levels. We could see like 465 to 460. It could sell off for a couple of trading days before getting a really nice bounce. And once it gets that bounce, I think this would be approaching Apple's event as Apple tries to bounce too. After Apple's event, there's no telling if the market sells off more or not. Who knows what's going to happen? But the market does have a tendency of selling off after some big events like that. So if that's the case, I mean, Nvidia could be just like continuing to range trade for a bit, but on the much larger time frame, you could also look at this. We have this potential. Many may argue we have like an inverse head and shoulders forming on it. So let me just fix this chart. Give me a couple of seconds, guys. But I mean, if this is the case, I would love to see this play out. So like people are talking about this inverse head and shoulders right here. I would love to see this play out, but it may not play out perfectly. It may take a little bit longer for this possible inverse head and shoulders to play out, and there could be more downside nonetheless before we get any sort of like really nice bounce. So in order for this to play out, I mean, we'd have to hold above 500. So far, it hasn't done that. We got a big rejection, and the market structure is trying to change. So I'm not really too worried about this for the time being. So for the smaller time frames, I'm going to be like more focused on what happens right here, and to see if we end up seeing this, potential head and shoulders develop right about here. Now, where is it? In case you guys didn't really see it, we have this like left shoulder here, the head, and the right shoulder could still be forming. It has very strong support in this 480 area. If that breaks, then there's going to be a lot more room for downside. But it could still bounce later on as we approach Apple's big event. So it's not necessarily the end of the world. With that said, guys, I think I went over Nvidia and the QQQ in enough detail. We're just going to be watching Apple and how it ends up affecting the entire market from the QQQ to Nvidia. But don't forget that these things have a tendency of moving very similar to that of Tesla. If they all start selling off, there could be more selling for Tesla as well. And I called out earlier that we're not necessarily done selling off with Tesla, or at least there's no confirmation of that. And we have these imbalances down here at this like in these like high 230s. So there's a risk of that potentially being tested. We could bounce first and then come down depending on how we open, or it could just start selling off. It all depends on different factors. There's also a possible head and shoulders on Tesla as well. So maybe we hit like the high 230s, then we get a bounce, and then we end up selling lower. That's also possible, but it all depends on different factors, what the news causes. And I don't really like to predict way too far into the future. I like to just look at it one day at a time, just for reference if you are more of a scalper or anything like that. So, with that said, I mean, yes, Tesla's not looking the best. I know that, but please remember the long term is still bright for Tesla. One of the reasons is because the Cybertruck is coming out soon. I believe that the end of the year's short squeeze is still a real possibility. As long as there's no like really major bearish catalyst, There's still potential for the market. There's still potential for Tesla towards the end of this year. So I'm not too scared. And I see this as another potential buying opportunity once we start to see Tesla's bottom, which we haven't truly seen confirmation of just yet. All right. Thank you for listening. I will be back tomorrow for my final video for the weekend. And I'm going to be talking about what I predict to happen for Tuesday. And until then, I thank you all so much for listening. Please enjoy the Labor Day weekend and do what you have to do, guys. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you and peace out.